'Tis I, your old pal King Chuck, and guess what today is? It is New Year's Eve, which means that it's time for the Bee-Otch of the Year. Yeah, we've been doing it for 26 years now. Holy shit. Yes, we've been doing it now 26 years. And, of course, over the years, we've handed the Bee-Otch of the Year to, of course, U.S. presidents. And, of course, the media. They tend to be the biggest attack-worthy people on our site here. So, this year, of course, we decided to do a little evolution, and we started doing this as a podcast as opposed to just simply a blog. So, without further ado, so now I'm going to do the top 3 Bee-Otches of the Year right now. And by the way, I'm going to try to keep this as telescoped as possible, due to the fact that, most award ceremonies last forever and ever and ever, and they're boring. I'll try to keep things simple. I'll try not to rant too much. Besides, I got stuff to do today. So, third place is the media. The media is third place. And, this has been a very tough year, obviously, for the media itself. The biggest news story, obviously, is the buyout of CBS and Paramount by Skydance. And we all heard what happened. 60 Minutes got sued by President Trump, and for $16 million. And instead of fighting, they decided to take the knee and pay Trump that money. And what does Trump do? So this is what happens. The reason why they paid the money was because they wanted the merger to happen. And Donald Trump had to allow the merger. Basically, they had no choice. That's what the problem with the media. They are bowing to Trump. And in CBS's case, they also fired Stephen Colbert, and they also got rid of any credibility with their news department. And how did they do that? Well, they decided to hire this nasty bimbo named Barry Weiss. Weiss, like me, is a podcaster and blogger, and she had this podcast and blog called, I don't know if it was a podcast, but anyway, it's called The Free Press. And now, CBS paid $150 million to her for the website. So now Barry is the editor-in-chief of CBS News. So the reason why they hired her was because they wanted to make good on their promise. And, basically it was to allow the merger to happen. So now CBS and Paramount are in the hands of the Ellison family, a mega wealthy family. And now they're turning CBS News from the people behind credible news to a network that's basically Fox News Light. And already Barry has sunk her claws into 60 Minutes by forcing them to redo a news story on the CCOT prison in El Salvador. And, of course, part of it was because, in her defense, she was like, well, there was nothing from the Trump camp regarding the story. I don't give a fuck. People want, the media is supposed to report on the truth, not on what Trump wants. Knock it off with this Chamber of Commerce crap. Because, Donald Trump is a liar, and he's simply put trying to get, basically, if you're not Christian white male, He doesn't give a shit. Or wealthy. That's the word I'm looking for. So, but now, of course, but the media also fucked over, Trump, the Trump regime fucked over Jimmy Kimmel. Of course, the head of the FCC went on this stupid little podcast, Brendan Carr, and told this podcast host, yeah, we're going to go after Jimmy Kimmel here. We're going to tell the media that, we're going to fight for Trump, and if you attack Trump, you're a bad guy, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So Jimmy got screwed. He was off the air for over a week. And, Jimmy had it right, said it right on his show. If you hate, if you force somebody off the air because their views don't match your views, then it is un-American. And it's right. He's right. He's right, folks. Because you want to know what? It happened to me many years ago with Roy Henderson up in Traverse City. He screwed over WLDR, and same shit happened to me. There was an asshole here in Grand Rapids, a former radio DJ, who was basically fired from all jobs he ever worked at, and turns out the guy had mental problems and was royally fucked up in the head. He decided to pull the same shit with me like CBS was doing with Trump. And this asshole doxed me by sending Roy my name, my address, and my phone number. And Roy said, you have 24 hours to take your shit about me off your website. Well, guess what happened to Roy? He was successfully sued by a former DJ of his who because he did not honor his contract. Yeah, $25,000. He got sued again. He's lost several radio licenses because he lied to the FCC saying that they're on the air. No, they weren't. He's had stations down in Texas that have been forced off the air. And already in the last couple of years, he's lost 2 stations. He had a station in Petoskey. That's off the air, 7:50 a.m. Bear Lake. He tried to move the Bear Lake station from Bear Lake to Bel Air 25 years ago. Never happened. The guy was loaded with empty promises. And, of course, he lost his lawsuit. And get this, he lost the transmitter site to WLDR. He lost it because he wasn't paying the taxes on it, so he lost it in the sheriff's sale. He tried to sue the folks who bought it, claiming that they had a violation of contract because they put the transmitter for 99.3 on the WLDR stick because the 99.3 had a bad the transmitter blew up many years ago, and Roy never fixed it. Well, guess what happened? What's happened? So anyway, now if WLDR is on the air, it's on at very low power, and it's not broadcasting regular programming. It's just to keep the license alive. And here's the thing, Roy doesn't even have great health issues. Roy's got bad health issues. He had a heart attack a couple of years ago, and he's had heart surgery because of that. The point is that he should have sold his stations years ago, but no. And, the real winners in all this were the folks in Traverse City. Well, Traverse City lost out. But now, it's like now, most of the time, if you're in Traverse City and you have one of those Bluetooth transmitter thingamabobbers, hey, you got a big empty space at 101.9 where you can put your little station on with a coverage of 10 feet. Yeah. But what's even more embarrassing for Roy is the fact that they put a new roundabout over by the WLDR studios at West Bay. And already there has been one near, get this, there was a car that almost hit the building. Yeah. It's like, come on. Yeah, there's been some very serious weather issues in Traverse City as of late. Yeah, I would love if somebody slid off the road and crashed into that building. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, there's very little. Yeah, last I heard, Roy now lived in a townhouse in Grand Rapids. I want to say it's over by the Walmart in Cascade. So, anyway, you see, folks, I've said this once and I'll say it again. The media is just like every other business. Look at what happened to WKLQ 23 years ago. They got rid of Howard Stern. They were like, we're gonna move in a whole different direction. And the direction usually is downhill. And look at what happened. KLQ, Citadel ended up being a penny stock. And Cumulus bought them out, and so Matt Hanlon was forced out of the job as general manager and market manager for that company. And then what happened was Hanlon ended up at Town Square selling ads, and he got fired from that job after he got busted for drunk driving. He did a Michigan left and in front of the Celebration Cinema on the Beltline, and ended up T-boning an old couple. The point, because of this, nobody in Grand Rapids wants to work with him anymore. Good riddance. And it's the same with all the media now. Look at CBS. Now that Barry Weiss, now that they're basically kissing Trump's ass, they did the Kennedy Center honors, and it got very low ratings. They aired that town hall between Barry Weiss and Erica Kirk, and nobody watched that. And it didn't even get good advertisers. It's like the only major advertiser it had was is the Chia Pet. The point is, folks, is when the media is just like every other business on the face of the earth. You see, when you start a business, you need to realize that you might tell yourself, well, you're your own boss now. That's not always true. You have a ton of bosses, and those bosses are your customers, and your customers are the hands that feed you. And if you go to one of those customers and accuse them of this, that, and everything else, if you tried to sue them like Roy tried to, cease and desist me like Roy did, you know what's going to happen? Nobody will want to work for you, and nobody will want to be your friend. End of discussion. Roy fucked up. And now look at the media. CBS kissed Trump's ass. ABC kissed Trump's ass and then lost $1 billion because everybody was canceling their Disney vacations and even getting rid of Disney Plus. They lost $1 billion. NBC, they're owned by Comcast. Comcast, they're one of the builders of Trump's ballroom. Not only that, but NBC, guess who's a correspondent? And guess who has her own show with the 4 Hours of Today? Jenna Bush Hagar. Now, the Bush family, I don't know how close the Bushes and the Trumps are. But the Bushes are still a horrible, horrible family. And it sucks that Jenna Bush Hagar is the host of one of the hours of the Today Show. And every time I see her on that show, I change the channel. It's sad considering that I grew up with the Today Show, and it's like if I'm up early, I'm usually watching the Today Show. But then when Jenna puts her ugly puss on there, I change the channel right away. So there you go. And yes, Fox, we don't need to go there. So now the traditional networks, they suck ass because that's how the media works now. It's not about what you want, it's what they want. And I've been saying that for 26 years. And it all it started for me when Howard Stern in Northern Michigan got, kicked off 9 and 10. And part of it was, of course, they weren't selling a lot of advertisers. But a lot of it, too, was because they were pressured by the religious right. And what's sad is up in Northern Michigan, one of the biggest advertisers that I've seen on TV is Ebel's General Stores. Ebel's is, they're very, here's the thing, they're very successful, but they're also very religious. And they're so religious, they're not even open on Sunday. But it doesn't matter. They're multimillionaires, and which is kind of, it's amazing how they're wealthy because they play the Jesus card, and yet the Bible talks about wealth being evil. It's kind of it's a contradiction. Anyway, so our third place finisher this year is the media. But there was some good things about the media too. I was real happy in Northern Michigan that KLT, the radio station I fucking hated growing up with, they did something. Get this, they now have a Friday night heavy metal show. I was shocked when they added the show a few weeks ago. I listened to it. It's not bad. They play a lot of stuff that you don't hear on even Rock 105.955. They even played Poppy on that show not too long ago. And it's like, I don't think, I check the playlist of Rock 105 and 955 somewhat often. That if you click on the listen live icon, it's, they do give out like the last 10 songs they played. And I never see Poppy on there. And I'm like, this is what happens when you have a penny waste like Cartman programming your station. He was never a really good programmer in the first place. And, Smitty was a way better programmer in my opinion. I miss Smitty. And let me explain this to you folks. I looked at my last paycheck of this past year, and Smitty admitted that when he was at Rock 105.955 and Black Diamond Broadcasting, he was only getting paid $40,000 a year. He said he never made more than 40. And I was like, I made way more than 40 this year. And it's because my bosses care about us. Even though, I wish I was paid a little bit more. And of course, I worked a lot of overtime too this past year. But it is what it is sometimes. So all I can say about that is, the radio business, and there, of course, here in Grand Rapids, there was some improvement too with 98.7. 98.7, which was the Grand Plain, which was a classic hit station. And then you got 100.5 The River, both owned, which is adult contemporary, both owned by Town Square. The good news is both stations changed formats. 98.7 is now a sports station, and 100.5 The River is now classic hits. So that's good news considering that, neither station had great ratings, and now people in Grand Rapids have a good local alternative to that big fat lunatic Bill Simonson in the afternoon. I mean, it's whatever, that's airing out of Detroit, but hey, it is what it is. So, and of course, oh yeah, another thing too that I'm really proud of. 92.5, the zoo. They used to be on 92.3, and they actually had a great signal in the Grand Rapids back in the day. So 92.5, the zoo. They were recently sold to Midwest Communications. So it looks like the station might end up going active rock, which is great considering that, there's a glut of butt rock stations in Kalamazoo, like 107.7 WRKR. That station's been around forever. And, but yeah, I see they're really trying hard to become a kick-ass station. Maybe, I already see that some of the more recent bands have been added to the playlist, and it looks like they are trying to wean out the butt rock. So we'll see. So anyway, that's some good news with radio. I mean, we need good news regarding radio because, the big corporations, iHeartMedia, Cumulus, they've done a good job of ruining it big time. And maybe now that George Soros, dare I say it, George Soros, now that he's a part owner of Odyssey, which is the former CBS radio, I mean, there looks like he's doing some good things with the stations, especially, of course, they were under siege recently because of what happened in San Francisco, where KCBS radio there reported on some of the ICE agents and where they were. And, and Brandon Carr was, basically saying you can't do that. We're trying to protect Americans. And it's like, I actually saw a commercial for ICE recently. And it says ICE was created on 9/11 to stop terrorism. And I'm like, okay, first of all, the terrorists on 9/11 were not from, from Venezuela. They were from Saudi Arabia. Most of them were. And guess who the Trump regime is doing business with? The Saudis. Jesus. Dave Barber was right. The Republican Party is all about the mice while the elephants squeak by. Yeah. They only care about the penis while the penis. They only care about the peanuts while the elephants storm by. Yeah. I can go on and on. So that's third place, the media. Now we go into second place. And get this, second place is Hulk Hogan. And Hulk was actually the first Bee-Otch of the Year. Hulk Hogan's story was that he was on the very first edition of Monday Night Raw on Netflix. They moved Raw from USA to Netflix, and then they moved SmackDown from Fox to USA. And, and so basically what a lot of it had to do with censorship because Fox had it was a live show on Fox, and there was a lot of censorship. I remember this, a couple of times I would see the screen go black in case somebody held up a sign with bad language on there or middle fingers and stuff like that. So what happened was Fox, so anyway, they put SmackDown is now on USA, while Raw is on Netflix. And basically, the new Netflix deal, it was the first, basically, they made it look like it was a rebirth of the WWE. A new beginning for them. And the reason why is because of the fact that Vince McMahon is not in the WWE anymore. He was fired. Yep. He was indeed fired. So Vince McMahon was fired because, of course, what happened was Vince, he sold the WWE to this company called TKO, and I guess it was a merger, so it was like 51% UFC and 49% WWE. So they were both owned by this company, TKO, and Vince still had minority shares in the WWE. Well, then what happened was TKO's executives found out that Vince McMahon he was paying off these women, many of them employees of the WWE, many of them wrestlers themselves. And what happened was he was paying them off because of the fact that Vince did sexual favors with them. And some of them were beyond gross, including pooping on them. He would poop on their face. And one girl said in her deposition that she remembered having to wipe off all the poop in her hair. I mean, the guy was gross. He was a sicko. And degrading. These girls didn't want that shit, no pun intended. So what happened was TKO said, okay, Vince, you're gone. And believe it or not, people were happy because Vince McMahon was a very powerful person. And I know Vince was a very disturbed young man because, he had a really troubled childhood due to the fact that his dad abandoned him as a young boy with his mother and lived in this crappy little trailer in North Carolina. He was abused as a child. He was sexually molested, apparently, and lived with there was a guy who, married his mom and then adopted him named Leo Lupton. And Leo was a drunk, abusive, didn't provide much for the family. And because of all this, Vince wanted retaliation against his now wealthy dad because he now had this Capital Wrestling Corporation, which eventually evolved into what is now the WWE. And then what happened was Vince ended up, so this is what happens. The elder Vince McMahon gets cancer. He's dying. Vince, who, by the way, made some bad business decisions and already went through bankruptcy once, he puts on a second mortgage on his house and tries to sell everything he has and buys his dad's company. And what happens is Vince ends up, so this is what happens. He buys out his father. His father on his deathbed says, do not buy buy the competition. Don't buy. So this is what happens. Wrestling was territorial. Vince decides to buy out one territory after another because, Capital Wrestling was making good money. And Vince, the elder Vince McMahon tells the younger Vince, why are you doing this? And younger Vince says, you work for me now. And the long story short was that Vince McMahon became a multi-billionaire. So this is what happens. Yes, Vince had a monopoly at one point. He owned the only major wrestling organization out there, and he was raking in most of the dough. But at the same time, yes, there were some new wrestling organizations that were formed, like TNA, which was formed by Jeff Jarrett, who was himself a former wrestler in the WWE. And he formed it because he was so angry at Vince and how he treated the death of Owen Hart. Owen Hart was the wrestler who, he was being lowered into the ring by a wire, and the wire snapped, and he fell headfirst into the ring. And, the sad truth is that Vince, everyone was happy he was gone. The wrestling got very boring in the 2000s, I'll be honest with you. And then what happened was when Vince was fired, people were like, they were praying and hoping that the WWE would kick ass and take names again, like it did during the Attitude Era. And boy, we were wrong. So this is what happens on that January night. Guess who they invite into the ring? Hulk Hogan. Bee-Otch of the Day in January. So the story with the Hulkster was that Hulk Hogan's career has been in the shitter in recent years. And what's funny is that the WWE was probably thinking to themselves, well, he was getting a lot of cheers and hooting and hollering at when he was doing the Trump rallies and, the RNC and all that shit. Well, guess what happened? Wrestling fans are different. A lot of wrestling fans are not ultra-conservative jackasses. So this is what happens. Hulk Hogan, he's standing on stage with the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. And it's like, people were booing. People were pissed. And what's even more embarrassing is the fact that it was all at the Intuit Dome in Los Angeles. Which, of course, it was an arena that itself was a part of a rebirth. Because, it was the first real arena in its history for the Los Angeles Clippers. Clippers were bought out a couple of years ago by Steve Ballmer, former Microsoft head. Steve Ballmer's story was that he bought the team from Donald Sterling. Sterling was banished from the NBA for being a racist because he was caught on tape telling his mistress, don't bring these people to the games. And then what happens is, then they build, so this is what happened. Ballmer said that he was going to build them a new arena. He did. And yes, the only problem I should tell you about the Clippers is that now they suck. Yeah, they're near dead last in the NBA right now. I think they've only won 10 games this year? Pistons are kicking ass. Oh my God. Pistons are doing good, and so are the Lakers. Anyway, so now it's embarrassing considering that Hulk Hogan many years ago himself was on tape using racial slurs, using the N-word. And his excuse was that it was because the other guys were using the N-word. So it was fashionable for him. It's like, dude, I've hung out with racist pricks myself. And it's like, if I'm with a bunch of racists, I want the fuck out of there. Sorry. I mean, that's what my life was like living in northern Michigan, hanging out with these kind of losers. Oh, man. Anyway, so what happened was, Hulk Hogan's a racist. Hulk Hogan is anti-First Amendment because, he shut down Gawker because Gawker had this sex tape of his and they posted it, and not only that, a guy by the name of Peter Thiel helped him with the lawsuit. He helped finance it. And Thiel, ultra right-wing dipshit, he was outed as being gay, So anyway, the rest of the story is that Hulk is anti-First Amendment and a racist. And for the WWE to say that he's a WWE hero and everyone's booing at him, well, yeah, it's like the Who. Here comes the new boss, same as the old boss. Won't get fooled again. Well, what's funny is that, he got Bee-Otch of the Day later on. Because, a couple months later, because guess what happened to him? He died. 71 years old, died of a massive heart attack. Although I did read that he also was fighting leukemia at the time. So what happened was a lot of people took to the internet and started trashing him, saying that the guy was a total asshole for what he did, not just to Gawker, not just to his family, not just to, even his own daughter, Brooke, stopped talking to him. Yeah, as a matter of fact, she's not even known as Brooke Hogan anymore. She got married to some hockey player, now has his last name, and they have a kid together. And so the story is, Hulk Hogan, when he died, people started to go to the internet and trash him. And even my good friend Darren Gibson of Southpaws, who is a huge wrestling fan, he attacked Hulk for the fact that, that he was a union buster. Back in the 80s, a bunch of WWE wrestlers wanted to unionize because, the pay sucked. And, of course, one of the leaders of the, unionizing movement was none other than the future governor of Minnesota. Not Tim Walz, but rather Jesse Ventura. So what happened was they had a closed-door meeting in the locker room, and a lot of the wrestlers showed up, and guess what happened? Somebody ranted to Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon fired Jesse Ventura because Vince told his wrestlers, "We will not unionize. I treat you better, good enough." And guess what happened? It turned out, it was determined that it was Hulk Hogan who did that because here's a couple of things. Number one, he had to testify against him because Vince McMahon was accused of giving his wrestlers drugs and steroids and stuff like that. And another issue was the fact that it turned out that Hulk Hogan was getting paid many times more than the other wrestlers in the WWE. He was the WWE's meal ticket. And what's funny was that one person who criticized all the criticisms against Hulk was none other than Mick Foley. He actually went to social media and said, "Can we wait 48 hours until somebody dies to trash them?" Or something like that. But you see, folks, Hulk Hogan was an asshole. Now here's the thing too about Mick Foley. Foley just announced that he's leaving the WWE. Yeah, when he said that his contract is going to expire pretty soon, so he's going to leave the WWE, and the reason why it was because he is angry at them for being so overly Republican. And of course, Triple H, who is I think his official role is brand ambassador. He's one of the higher ups there. So Hulk Hogan so the story is Triple H is actually on President Trump's fitness council because Donald Trump brought back the fitness test, the national fitness test for children, which, by the way, was created in the 60s to keep kids fit so in case there's a draft that comes. And people are like, well, Trump is an anti-war president because he said that on day one he was going to stop the war and, he was going to aid Ukraine. You know what, folks? And now they're talking about Venezuela. Look at all the shit that's going on there. Trash, shooting at these boats. Anyway. But all I can say, folks, is, when somebody dies and that person is a bad person, that does not mean, we should kiss their ass. Well, most of the bad things they did was bad, but let's focus on the good things. Yeah, folks, a lot of famous people died this year, okay? And a lot of assholes died this year. There was a guy named Ian Watkins. Ian was the lead singer of a band called Lost Prophets, a band that I really liked back in, 20 years ago. They had a couple of good songs. But guess what? Ian Watkins was a sex offender. He molested boys. He molested young children. And get this, he was stabbed in prison by a fellow prisoner. He was a scumbag. And honestly, how many tributes were made about him? Really? Yeah. So I'm glad he's gone. Another asshole who died, of course, was my stepdad. I even made a podcast about him. He was a homewrecker. He screwed over my mom financially. And, because of that, my mom now lives in a crappy apartment. And she's 70 years old and still has to work because of all the financial damage he did to her. And the only good thing I can say about him is that he's now dead. Good riddance. Ugh. But you see, folks, I know some people are like, we should respect people who died. But I'm like, I'm a different story. Brigitte Bardot too. Oh, yeah, some people were like, well, she was a hot sex symbol. Yeah, she was. And she was, an animal rights activist. Both great. But she was also a right-wing cunt. She actually vouched to get Muslims kicked out of France. She felt that Muslims were scumbags. And I got news for you, folks. I know some Muslims. They're way better than many of the so-called Christians I've met in my life. People of all religions, people who are too overly religious sometimes tend to be the biggest assholes on the face of the earth. And what's even more is that Hulk Hogan was a holier-than-thou Christian. And yet he cheated on his wife. He screwed over a lot of people financially. And, oh yeah, one of his best friends was Trump. Somebody who is a sex offender himself and a bankrupter. So now, enough about the Hulkster. Hulkamania has come to an end. Because now it's time to hand out the big one. The Bee-Otch of the Year for 2025. Okay, it's Donald Trump. We gave Trump the Bee-Otch of the Day multiple times this year. And we all know the reasons. He was supposed to release all the Epstein files, and we only so far have gotten, not a whole lot. Nothing incriminating. Trump, of course, has attacked everybody. I just heard, and even today he did some really shitty shit. By the way, I should have told you why Mick Foley is leaving the WWE too. It's because of what Donald Trump posted about Rob Reiner. Yeah. But, this is what happened today. Donald Trump, now as we have all heard by now, JFK's granddaughter, Tatiana Schlossberg, died today. She died yesterday, excuse me. She was just 35 years old, young mother. Tatiana had just announced that she died. She was battling cancer. And what does Trump do? He goes on his Truth Social and attacks the Kennedys. And he was saying how happy he was that he slapped his name on the Kennedy Center, because he cries that the Kennedys don't even go to their own facility. And that the only Kennedy who was there this past year was his own health secretary, who is JFK Jr., who of course is doing a bang up job of trying to get us all sick again. Of course, measles cases have skyrocketed under his spell. And, one of the horrible things that he did earlier this year was say, without any proof, that Tylenol is the cause of autism. And as somebody who is autistic himself, that's not true, because under Joe Biden's administration, they found out that there's actually a link between, and I've mentioned this earlier, my mom was too dirt cheap to give me infant formula, so she made it herself, and it turns out that homemade infant formula is connected to autism. You see, folks, we need to know facts. And this is not what we're getting from Trump. We're not getting the truth, is what it is. And for him to attack the Kennedy family when their beloved granddaughter dies of a terrible disease at just 35, it makes me sick. And now I'm hearing that, Lauren Boebert. Now, Lauren, I agree, is a total cunt. She was a big attacker of Obama, but she was also wanting the Epstein files to be released. And what had happened was Trump and his cabinet went after her. They really got angry at her because Trump, as it turns out, there's a lot of Republicans who were on Epstein Island too, getting, raping all these young girls. That's what it is, folks. It's stupidity at its best. And if I can be sick, you should be sick too. So this is what, if you haven't heard Midas Touch or any other media source that's actually telling the real news, in Lauren Boebert's district, I guess there's a bunch of, how do I say this? I guess there's an issue with water. Like, some of the water is polluted, so they were supposed to, approve a plan to provide clean drinking water to like 50,000 people. And unfortunately, Trump vetoed the bill, claiming that it was a waste of taxpayer money. No, the truth was, it was because Lauren Boebert, because she wanted the Epstein files to be released. It's a power grab, folks. Donald Trump it's like when I think of that situation about water, it makes me think of another guy, Rick Snyder, the horrible last governor of Michigan that we had before Gretchen Whitmer came in. And, Gretchen's done a great job so far. Mostly. I mean, she's not perfect. But then again, I think she's the best governor in my lifetime in this state, even though she ain't perfect. But anyway, so the story is Gretchen. So anyway, but you see, we can talk a mile about Trump and his disastrous second term. I mean, there was some good things about 2025. And usually, And it to me, it was the last 20 days, the first 20 days of this year, at least we still had Joe Biden. And one of the best things that he did was he freed Leonard Peltier. And, he should have been freed decades ago. And even Obama didn't want to free him. But, the sad truth is, and I know some people are like, well, Joe Biden pardoned his own son, Hunter. But you know what? Guess what? Donald Trump pardoned some of the scumbaggiest people on the face of the earth. He pardoned drug abusers, rapists. He pardoned the assholes who, on January 6th, he pardoned them all, put them back on the street. He's not, and yet there's innocent people who are being busted by ICE every day, all because of the color of their skin. And that's what Donald Trump is doing, folks. He wants to throw the wrong people in prison. If you're black, you're whack. Hey, that's what Donald and his dad did. But you see, folks, we can talk a mile about Donald Trump. We need to talk about the new year, 2026. 2025 was a mostly sucky year. I agree. But there's hope. Let's remember something. Yes, we have to sit through many months of Trump and his diatribes and him, the fact that he's, an old man going on toddler. But the reality is, there is some good news. And the good news is that 2026 is an election year. 2026 is an election year. And it's important not just to vote Democrat, folks, but vote for the most progressive candidates. Period. End of story. The Democrat, you see, folks, you got to remember why we have Donald Trump back in the White House. It's because the Democrats were not, true progressives this time around. Hell, the last 3 elections, we weren't even given much of a choice to choose our the president, the Democratic nominee. 2016, America voted for Bernie Sanders. Oh, we can't have Bernie. He's too progressive. Oh, they voted for him again in 2020, but we got to, the superdelegate system says otherwise. It was bullying. That's what it was. Bullying. And what's funny was Kamala Harris, when Kamala Harris was running for president, you got to remember all the people out there who were trying real hard to get her in. People like Taylor Swift and another person that comes to mind, Oprah. And to me, if you're a man and if you watch Oprah, it's like, yeah, it is kind of, I'm not a huge fan of Oprah. Never have been. I mean, Oprah does give me some slight douche chills, but she is the Pied Piper of women. But you also have to remember the type of people that Oprah worked with. Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil. Dr. Oz is now one of Trump's ass kissers. And so was Dr. Phil. Bad career move for Dr. Phil. Look at what he did this past year. He actually started a new media company called Merit Street. He partnered with the Trinity Broadcasting Network, TBN, and they ended up suing each other. And what's funny is that for many, many years, Dr. Phil was like, oh, rape is bad. And yet TBN hid the fact for many, many years that the granddaughter of the founders of TBN, Paul and Jan Crouch, the granddaughter's name was Kara Crouch. At 13 years old, she was raped in a hotel room by a TBN employee. And their response, oh, it's all your fault. Oh, you should have never let that man in your room. And what happened was, so the good news was she sued TBN and got $2 million. She should have gotten way more. But it's hypocritical on Dr. Phil's part for the fact that he allowed he's doing business with a bunch of folks who enabled rape. And they never pressed charges against the guy. That was their job. Because here's the thing about TBN. They hate being in a courtroom. They hate having to actually tell the truth and admit that they're a bunch of crooks. That's what it is, folks. They're crooks. And, the point is, the thing, folks, of course, now that, Bill Clinton is all over the Epstein files, and of course, there was a photo of him in a spa with somebody's face being blocked out, probably one of Epstein's victims. It makes me think to myself, it makes me a little bit angry that in my lifetime, the first actual decent president was Obama. And Obama was elected in 2009. I was 28 years old. I had to wait 28 years for a good president in my lifetime. Now, don't get me wrong. Yeah, people will talk about how Bill Clinton, balanced the budget and got rid of the deficit, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, he didn't do jack shit for the middle class or improving health care. Because, they're Dinos, Democrats in name only. But, folks, next year, I think will be a better year. Because people are fucking sick and tired of Trump. They're tired of MAGA. And there's proof. When Donald Trump, let's remember, a couple of weeks ago, he was at a casino in Pennsylvania and only 200 people showed up. He was in a room that sat over 400 in a freaking banquet hall. People are tired. People are tired of being lied at. Wages aren't going up. The only thing that's going up is the price of our food and everything else. Tariffs are not working, folks. We're headed towards another Great Depression. But there is more good news. Let's remember what's going on with Trump. Both his hands are miscolored. Have you noticed this? Mice Touch was talking about this. And one of his hands has a little hole in it. Word has it that Donald Trump might actually be taking experimental medicine for dementia, because dementia is in the Trump family. His dad died from Alzheimer's. And there are rumors going around that there are some folks around Donald Trump who work with him directly, who are now texting to each other the numbers 25. The 25th Amendment, which means that if he is unable to remain president of the United States, then yes, he will have to be taken out. Granted, we're going to be stuck with J.D. Vance for a couple of years. He's not a great guy either, and he's kind of fucked up in the brain. But hey, any means necessary, folks. Any means necessary. We got to get Trump out of the White House and return America back to order. And God, I hope the next president of the United States will be a true blue progressive. we need to, folks, we need at least a $15 an hour minimum wage. It should be a little higher, maybe 18. We need universal health care. We need a livable wage for everyone. Yeah, I told you, $18 an hour. We need a better life. And we're not getting it under Trump. We need to tell the wealthy, pay your damn taxes. And also, we need a more free, independent media. People shouldn't have to go underground to tell the goddamn truth. Because now, because of Trump and his bullying to CBS and ABC and everyone else, we shouldn't have to deal with lies. But that's what's going on, folks. That's what happens when people become gullible and vote for Trump, or any Republican for that matter. It's time for America to change for the better. So this November, vote not just blue, but the darkest blue you can get. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our last Bee-Otch of the Day of the year. And I want to thank each and every one of you for supporting our site for 26 years. We are, folks, we're still scratching the surface. And we're going to keep pawing at it more and more. I hope 2026 will be a better year for everyone. Let's raise a glass. In my case, my water thermos from work. Skull. Yeah. Okay, folks. I'll see you in 2026. But until then, good year. Good luck. Sayonara 2025. Don't let the door hit you hard on the ass.